Hello everybody and welcome to the shop. I just finished turning another Kit-Less ink pen and I've got it right here. I'm not going to show you a whole lot about it in the beginning of the video because I'd like for you to watch the video. I am going to let you know this is a long video. I'll give you a little bit of a pre-warning. The body of the pen went extremely smooth. I had a little bit of an issue with the cap. I had to take some evasive action to make the cap work, but there is the cap. This is the cap. I was able to fix it. I think you might enjoy watching some of the thought process and watching me work through that. I hope the video is not too long for you, but it kind of is what it is. This is a very labor-intensive process, and there's a lot of parts to it. So I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to start this project with a rod of Alumilite that is 8.5 inches long. I've laid out all 3 segments to my pen, and normally I would mark between the segments on the rod and get it cut into 3 separate pieces. I'm going to start by marking my Alumilite rod at 4 inches for the body of the pen, and then I'll bring the cap down and I'll mark the rod at 6 3/4 of an inch for the cap. Cap, body. I'm going to run this over to the bandsaw, get these 2 pieces separated from the rod, and then we'll see what the next step is. One thing that I forgot to do in the video, but I remembered when I made it to the bandsaw, was to draw a horizontal line down my blank. What that will do is ensure that the body of the pen is the proper orientation in relation to the cap. To be able to turn and thread my Alumilite rod, I need to have a very solid and a very true grip on the rod. To do that, I'm going to use a collet chuck. And this is a 1920 millimeter collet. And what I have found is this blank is a little thicker at this end than it is at this end. You'll notice I can slide it in, but it doesn't go all the way through. So what I'm going to do is I'll start by sliding it in from the back. And it doesn't have to stick all the way out. That's plenty of distance for me to work with. I'll put my collet into the chuck. And we'll tighten her down. We have a couple of little bars here that we can use to get a good grip. And now we've got a nice solid grip on our blank. Let's start by truing our blank up. I need to put a tenon on this blank that is 13 millimeters in diameter, and that tenon needs to be about 5/16 of an inch deep. Now I've converted 5/16 of an inch to metric, and it comes out to 7.9 millimeters, and I've set my calipers, so I'm going to go ahead and mark my blank. I've reset my calipers to 13 millimeters, and I'm just going to use a thin parting tool to cut the tenon on the end of my blank. That loud squealing you heard was because I don't have any support on the blank. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up my tailstock. I've got a 60-degree live center. I'm just going to lock that into place, and that should give me the support that I need to get this tenon cut properly. Be sure to stop frequently and check your tenon. We still got a little ways to go, but we're getting there. Let's go ahead and check our tenon. 1302. We're a little larger than we need to be, but I think we're going to be okay. Before we start threading our tenon, we want to do two things. We want to make sure that the shoulder here is as square as possible, and we want to cut a tiny relief on the back of the tenon. For the next step, I'm going to use a tool called a sliding tap and die holder. And the way this works, the back half is a number 2 Morse taper, which will go into the tailstock of your lathe. The front half is the handle that holds the tap adapter or the die adapter, and basically it can slide in and out on the steel shaft and rotate. I'm going to cut threads on my tenon with an M13 triple start die. Now, the die has numbering on one side and no numbering on the other. The side with the numbering is the side we want facing the threads that we're going to cut. I'm going to put this die into a die holder, and I'll tighten it down and make sure it's centered off camera. The die holder fits into the handle of my sliding tap and die holder. I'll tighten that down with the set screw, and we'll be able to use this to cut the threads on our tenon. I'm ready to cut my threads, and I just finished putting a little mineral oil on the Alumilite tenon, and that will help the die more easily cut the tenon. So what we're going to do now is we'll just twist it forward a couple and back one, forward a couple threads, back off a little bit to let it clear, and we repeat this process all the way down the blank. You can see the little curls forming from the threads as it cuts. Now we've got threads all the way down our tenon. Looks really good. I'm just going to basically brush those off with the toothbrush here just to clean up the threads. They look really nice. I've got a cap here from another pen, and I just want to test my threads. Got a nice fit. Everything is tight. Very happy with those threads. I need to drill a 9mm hole down through the center of my blank, and I want it to be the same depth as the body of the pen that I'm trying to create. We're just going to take our calipers and we'll extend them relatively far out. We'll put the body of the pen on the end of the calipers, and then we'll retract them until the body of the pen, the end of it, touches the end of the calipers. We'll lock our calipers in place, and we know that this is the depth that we need to drill to. To start our hole, we're going to use a centering bit. And what this is a very stiff drill bit that will start a hole dead center, whereas a drill bit, since it's long, could flex a tiny bit and work its way off center. This guarantees you're going to go straight down the middle of your blank. I'm just going to chuck this up in my Jacob's chuck, and we'll drill our starter hole. I'm going to start my process again by putting a little bit of mineral oil on the bit. This helps to keep the bit cool because you don't want heat build up when you're drilling plastics. I've got the lathe turned down to about 700 RPMs, and we're just very slowly going to start our hole. Want to clear the shavings often, even with the starter bit. If you don't clear the shavings, they can pack up in the bit and actually build additional heat that could cause your blank to split. Now we're ready to switch over to the drill bit and finish this hole. I'm not sure how well you can see this on the video, but right there is a red mark that I made with a permanent marker. This is how deep I need to drill into my blank. Back the bit up a little bit. So it's going to be a fairly deep blank, but that's okay. I cut it long enough. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and slather this bit up with a little bit of mineral oil and start drilling. You'll notice that I do have a piece of cardboard below my blank, and that is because this mineral oil will drip and it gets your lathe all kind of sticky. It doesn't hurt anything because it will help prevent rust, but it just kind of gets messy and all the shavings sort of stick to it. So I've been using a piece of cardboard. A lot of guys will use Pam or canola oil, and I decided not to do that because when you spray it, then it goes back all over everything, and I just didn't want to deal with that. We're turning it at about 700 RPMs. We're just going to go nice and slow, and we're going to clear the bit very often because if you let the plastic build up in the bit, it will build additional heat and could cause the blank to explode. Just start slowly. There's no need to get in a hurry. As long as I see the ribbons coming out, I'll back off a little bit and I'll just keep moving forward. Right there, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but the lathe sort of drug a tiny bit. When that happens, when I notice a little bit of drag, I'll back the bit out, I'll clear it off, and I'll recoat it with a little bit of more mineral oil. I'm probably going to go in about 1/4 of an inch to maybe 3/8 of an inch each time before I back the bit out and clear it. And I'm just watching. When I see the ribbons sort of stop moving out, or I see the speed of the lathe change, that's when I know it's time to get that bit out of there. See how it was starting to pack right there? That's definitely what we don't want to happen. I believe I've reached the proper depth. What I'm going to do now is get my Jacob's chuck and drill bit out of the way, and then I'm going to use my calipers and just double check the depth. Perfect. I tried to extend, I maybe could extend that just a fraction, but that's probably because I'm going down the center of this blank and the bit does have the point, so this probably extended into the area where the point was of the bit, so I think I'm perfect. I'm super happy with that. When I mentioned that I was drilling a 9mm hole, I'm not sure if I stated this or not, but this is actually an S bit. This is the perfect size. I brought my tap and die holder back out, and I've replaced the die holder with a tap holder, and I've got a M101 tap chucked up. I'm going to go ahead and put some mineral oil all over my tap. And now we're going to tap the hole. Give it a couple turns, back it up. 2, maybe 3 turns, back it up. Just repeat this all the way through until we have threaded the blank, and I'm going to thread in all the way to the end of the threads. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and back out, and I'm going to apply just a little bit more mineral oil to my tap. I'll start by cleaning it, get all of the excess plastic off of it. Now we'll thread her back in there until we meet some resistance. Right there, and start over. That should do it. Now that we have it threaded, I'm just going to bring over a section from another pin, and we're going to test it out. Nice, tight fit. Looks amazing. I've removed the blank from the collet it was in, and I've brought out this mandrel. What this is a 1/2-inch aluminum rod that has been taken down just a little bit and threaded to M10-1 threads so that it will thread into the blank. This is the mandrel we're going to use to hold the blank in order to shape it. Now I pulled out the 1920 collet, and I've got a 1/2-inch collet, which is the perfect size for this mandrel to fit into. Just going to line everything up. Get our little bars here and tighten it. I'll put the lathe on low speed, and it looks like it's turning fairly true. It's a little out of round because I hadn't trued this end of it up yet, but that's what we're going to do right now. Before I true the blank up, I do want to make one comment. I brought my calipers back out, and I measured the inside depth of the blank. So from the collet out to about here is the inside depth of my blank. So I don't have a lot of extra blank to work with, so I'm probably not going to be removing any piece of this blank. I'm probably just going to square the end up and then shape the blank to the desired shape. Let's start by truing this blank up. I'm happy with the shape that I've achieved. I'm going to go ahead and back off the tailstock. And what I want to do now is square up the end of the pin. And I do want to test it real quick to make sure that I didn't force the tip of my 60-degree live center through the pin. I grabbed a very small drill bit, and I'm going to stick it into the hole where the 60-degree live center was. And luckily it is solid, which means I didn't penetrate into the cavity inside my pin. So I'm going to go ahead now, true the end of this up, clean it up, and then we'll be ready to sand this down and get it polished up. Okay, I'm really happy with this. As I was squaring the end up and cleaning it up, I just made it just ever so slightly concave. And then what I'm going to do is come back and I'm going to put a chamfer on this outside corner. I'm very happy with how this is turning out. I really like the little concave area on the end. I like the chamfer. I like the feel of this in my hand. I think it's going to be a really nice pen. What we're going to do now is sand it, and I'll start out with 150 and I'll work up through 400. I'll sand with the lathe running, and then I'll turn the lathe off and I'll sand back and forth to remove those spiral scratches between each grit, and we'll finish up with micro mesh once we've made it to 400. I sanded the blank through 400. It's really smooth. It looks nice. It's time to polish it up with the micro mesh. I just finished up with the micro mesh. I don't see any scratches in the blank. It's got a beautiful finish on it. The end looks great. I still have my chamfer. I'm sorry, I still have my little concave area here, but I kind of lost my chamfer. That was hard to, with the sandpaper, to keep that nice sharp corner. So it kind of rounded a little bit, but it still looks really nice. I like how it looks. Let me get out my buffer, and we're going to buff this up.